The first time Ambassador Tom Williams walked into the Galactic Council chambers, the silence was deafening. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to stare at the human representative as he made his way to the designated Earth section. The massive circular hall stretched upward for what seemed like miles, filled with beings that looked like they had stepped out of humanity's wildest nightmares and dreams. The insectoid queen of the hive. Collective clicked her razor-sharp mandibles together in what Tom had learned was their version of laughter. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber lights as she leaned forward in her crystalline seat. Next to her, the towering reptilian from the Scaled Dominion flicked his forked tongue, tasting the air with obvious disdain. His scales shifted color, from deep green to warning yellow, as he regarded the human with barely concealed contempt. "This is what Earth sends to represent their species," rumbled Chancellor Thok from the Stone Brotherhood, his rocky exterior grinding as he spoke. "They look even more fragile than the reports suggested." Tom kept his expression neutral as whispers and clicking sounds filled the chamber. He had been briefed extensively on galactic politics during the 6-month journey to the Council headquarters. Earth's xenobiologists had studied every piece of information about the various species, their cultures, their military capabilities, and their attitudes toward newcomers. What they had found was not encouraging for humanity's future. The galaxy was ruled by strength. Every major species had evolved from apex predators or had developed overwhelming technological advantages that made them formidable opponents. The Hive Collective had conquered 12 star systems through coordinated swarm tactics that overwhelmed any defense. The Scaled Dominion possessed natural armor that could deflect most energy weapons and claws that could tear through reinforced steel. The Stone Brotherhood had bodies that could survive in the vacuum of space and strength that could crush starship hulls with their bare hands. And then there were humans, soft-skinned, slow-moving, with no natural weapons or armor. Required artificial environments to survive in space, needed complex technology to travel between stars, and appeared to have reached their current level of development through cooperation rather than conquest. To the galactic community, they seemed like prey animals that had somehow stumbled into intelligence. "The human delegation may address the Council," announced Prime Arbiter Vol, floating energy being whose voice resonated through translation devices placed throughout the chamber. The various species had developed universal translators centuries ago, though Tom suspected some of the more subtle insults were getting lost in translation. Tom stood and activated his own translation device, noting how several aliens leaned forward with what appeared to be curiosity. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, I bring greetings from Earth and humanity. We are grateful for this opportunity to join the galactic community and contribute to the peace and prosperity that has made your civilization so remarkable." More clicking and rumbling filled the chamber. The Queen tilted her head in a gesture that Tom recognized as confusion. "Contribute?" she asked, her translated voice carrying overtones of amusement. "What exactly does your species believe it can contribute to galactic civilization?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tom had prepared for this moment, knowing that humanity's first impression would determine their place in the galactic hierarchy for generations to come. He could present Earth's scientific achievements, their cultural diversity, their capacity for innovation under pressure, but he sensed that these beings would interpret any display of human accomplishment as either weakness or irrelevance. "We are explorers and problem solvers," Tom replied carefully. "Humanity has survived and thrived on a world that has tested us with ice ages, global catastrophes, and resource scarcity. We have learned to adapt, to innovate, and to work together when faced with challenges that should have destroyed us." Chancellor Thok's rocky face cracked into what might have been a smile. "Survival is not strength, human. Any pests can survive by hiding in cracks and feeding on scraps. The question is whether your species can contribute anything meaningful to those who actually shape the galaxy." The reptilian delegate hissed his agreement. "The Dominion has reviewed Earth's military capabilities. Your largest vessels would serve as adequate escape pods for our smallest fighters. Your weapons technology is centuries behind current galactic standards. Your population centers are completely undefended against orbital bombardment." He paused to let this sink in. Perhaps humans would serve well in administrative roles, managing supply chains for the warrior races. Tom felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. We appreciate the Council's assessment of our current capabilities. However, we believe that true strength comes not from the weapons one is born with, but from the ability to create solutions when faced with impossible odds. The Queen's mandibles clicked rapidly. How charmingly naive. In the real galaxy, young species, strength is measured in the number of worlds you can conquer and hold. The Hive has claimed systems by sending billion-strong swarms that darken entire suns. The Dominion maintains order through fear of their battle fleets. The Stone Brotherhood builds fortresses that have never fallen. She gestured with one of her 4 arms. What has humanity conquered? We conquered our own world, Tom said quietly. Not through war, but through persistence. We eliminated diseases that had plagued us for millennia. We learned to harness forces that could destroy continents. We reached into space despite having no natural ability to survive there. We built a global civilization from thousands of competing tribes and nations. The chamber erupted in what Tom was beginning to recognize as alien laughter. Species that had never agreed on anything seemed united in their amusement at human pretensions. The Queen raised one arm for silence. How wonderful for you, she said with mock sincerity. Unfortunately, the galaxy is not impressed by species that can barely manage their own planet. You will find that real power requires rather different skills than cooperation and innovation. Prime Arbiter Vol's energy form pulsed with what Tom interpreted as impatience. The Council recognizes Earth's admission to galactic society as a minor member state. Humanity will be granted protectorate status under the guidance of more established species. This concludes the formal proceedings. As the various delegates began to file out of the chamber, Tom remained standing at his position.
He watched the
aliens leave, noting their casual dismissal, their obvious contempt, their complete certainty that they understood what humanity represented. Not one of them had asked about Earth's history in any detail. None had inquired about human psychology, human adaptability, or human potential for violence when threatened. They saw soft skin and assumed weakness. They saw cooperation and assumed submission. They saw a lack of natural weapons and assumed helplessness. Tom realized that the galaxy's greatest powers had made the same mistake that countless predators on Earth had made when evaluating humans as potential prey. They had confused kindness with weakness and civilization with vulnerability. As Tom gathered his materials and prepared to return to Earth with news of humanity's new status as a protected species, he found himself thinking about something his military advisors had told him before departure. The most dangerous predators were often the ones that didn't look dangerous until it was too late. And Earth had spent millions of years training a species that could turn anything into a weapon when survival was at stake. The galaxy was about to learn why that mattered. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:15, Earth Standard Time. Every screen across the planet flickered simultaneously as the transmission overrode all communication networks. The face that appeared belonged to General Krex of the Hegemony Alliance, his scaled features twisted into what humans had learned to recognize as a sneer of superiority. People of Earth, the translation began, each word dripping with contempt. You have been judged by the powers that truly rule this galaxy. Your species has been found wanting in strength, courage, and the basic qualities that separate civilized beings from prey animals. President Maria Santos watched from the Oval Office as the alien general continued his speech. Around her, military advisors and cabinet members sat in stunned silence. The transmission was being broadcast to every human settlement across the solar system, from the mining colonies on Mars to the research stations orbiting Jupiter. Therefore, the Hegemony Alliance hereby offers Earth one final opportunity to avoid complete annihilation. You have 30 standard days to formally surrender your sovereignty and accept vassal status under our protection. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your governments will be dissolved. Your people will serve at the pleasure of their new masters. General Lisa Torres felt her jaw clench as she listened from the Pentagon war room. The walls around her displayed tactical information about every human military asset in the solar system. The numbers told a grim story. Earth's combined fleets consisted of fewer than 200 vessels, most of them exploration ships hastily retrofitted with primitive weapons. The Hegemony Alliance commanded thousands of warships, each one capable of reducing entire continents to radioactive ash. Should you choose the path of foolish resistance, General Krex continued, know that we have eliminated 47 species who made similar mistakes. Their worlds now serve as monuments to the price of defying the natural order. Your choice is simple. Submit and live as servants, or resist and die as martyrs to your own stupidity. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving billions of humans staring at blank screens. For several minutes, the planet fell into an eerie silence as people processed what they had just witnessed. Then the panic began. In London, crowds gathered. In the streets demanding immediate surrender. In Moscow, protesters called for a fight to the death rather than slavery. In New York, the stock markets crashed as investors fled to safer assets. In Beijing, emergency sessions convened to discuss humanity's impossible situation. But in military installations around the world, a different kind of conversation was taking place. They think we're weak, General Torres said to the assembled officers in the secure conference room beneath the Pentagon. Representatives from every major military power on Earth had gathered within 6 hours of the broadcast. They think 30 days is enough time for us to panic, argue among ourselves, and eventually beg for mercy. Colonel Alex Rivera from the Space Defense Command leaned forward. Ma'am, with respect, maybe they're right about our weakness. Our entire space fleet wouldn't last 10 minutes against a single hegemony dreadnought. Their shields can deflect. Our most powerful weapons, their guns can crack moons. That's exactly what they want us to think, replied General Torres. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's military assets. But they're making the same mistake every bully makes. They're assuming that because we don't look dangerous, we can't become dangerous when we need to. Admiral Susan Park from the Pacific Fleet nodded slowly. You're talking about asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run operations. I'm talking about something much more fundamental than that, Torres said. I'm talking about the fact that every human being on this planet descended from survivors. Our ancestors didn't climb to the top of the food chain because they were the biggest or strongest predators. They got there because they were the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most ruthlessly efficient killers when their survival was threatened. She gestured to the officers around the table. Look at what we've accomplished in just the last century. We went from horse-drawn carriages to faster-than-light travel. We split the atom. We eliminated diseases that killed millions. We've built weapons that could sterilize our entire planet. Her voice grew harder. And we did all of that while fighting constant wars against each other. Imagine what we can accomplish when we have a common enemy. General Boris Petrov from the Russian Federation spoke up. The politicians will never agree to this. Half of them are already drafting surrender documents. They're terrified of being responsible for human extinction. Then we don't wait for the politicians, Torres replied. Emergency powers were activated the moment that transmission ended. Military command now has authority to take any action necessary to defend human civilization. The question is whether we're going to use that authority to surrender gracefully or to remind the galaxy why Earth produced the most dangerous species in known space. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These were career military officers who had spent their lives preparing for conflicts against other humans. Now they were being asked to plan for a war against technologically superior aliens who viewed humanity as barely worth exterminating. Colonel David Dick Kim from the Cyber Warfare Division cleared his throat. If we're really doing this, we need to start with intelligence gathering. Need to know everything about hegemony technology, tactics, and psychology. We need to understand their weaknesses. Already in progress, Torres said. Our people have been studying every piece of alien technology we've encountered since first contact. We've been running war game scenarios for exactly this situation. And we've been developing contingency plans that the Galactic Council would consider completely insane. She activated another display showing research facilities across Earth. Project Prometheus has been developing stealth technology that can hide entire fleets. Project Hydra has been working on self-replicating weapon systems. Project Pandora has been creating biological agents specifically designed to target alien physiology. The officer stared at the displays with growing amazement and horror. During the months of peaceful contact with the galactic community, Earth's military had been quietly preparing for the possibility that diplomacy might fail. "You've been planning this since first contact," Admiral Park said with something like admiration in her voice. "I've been planning this since the first alien ship appeared in our solar system," Torres confirmed. "Because I learned a long time ago that the most important military principle is simple. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. And when war comes, make sure the enemy regrets starting it." General Petrov leaned back in his chair. "The hegemony thinks they're giving us 30 days to surrender. What are we really going to do with 30 days? Torres smiled, and for the first time since the broadcast, it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We're going to use 30 days to show them the difference between humans who are being polite and humans who are fighting for their survival. They want to see what Earth trained us to be. They're about to find out." Outside the conference room, across the planet and throughout the solar system, humanity began its transformation from a peaceful, spacefaring civilization into something the galaxy had never encountered before. The hegemony had made their ultimatum. Expecting to face frightened prey animals, dead, they had awakened predators who had simply been playing nice. The countdown to war had begun. And Earth's children were remembering what their ancestors had always known. When survival is at stake, anything can become a weapon, and anyone can become a killer. The hegemony fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system on day 29, one full day before their ultimatum expired. General Krex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the scanner displays with satisfaction. Over 300 warships had answered his call, enough firepower to reduce every planet in the system to molten slag if necessary. "Sir, we're detecting no human fleet movements," reported his tactical officer. Their major installations appear to be running on minimal power. Several of their orbital platforms have been completely abandoned. Krex nodded approvingly. As expected, humans have realized the hopelessness of their situation and are preparing to surrender. Begin standard occupation formation. Deploy scouts to map their remaining defensive positions. What Krex could not see was Colonel Matt Rivera floating in his stealth ship barely 1,000 kilometers from the hegemony flagship. The prototype vessel was smaller than most shuttlecraft, its experimental cloaking system rendering it completely invisible to alien sensors. Matt watched the enemy formation through passive scanners while speaking quietly into his communications. "Array, Ghost Leader to all units. The Fisher in the Barrel. Pete, the Fisher in the Barrel." Across the solar system, 57 similar vessels acknowledged the signal. Each ship carried a single pilot and enough experimental weaponry to cripple vessels 100 times their size. They had been positioned days ago, waiting in the cold darkness of space like patient hunters. The hegemony advanced scouts moved toward Mars first, expecting to find the mining colonies either abandoned or filled with terrified humans ready to surrender. Instead, they found what appeared to be a completely dead world. The settlements showed no signs of life, the communication. Arrays were silent, and even the automated systems seemed to have been shut down. "Something feels wrong about this," muttered Commander Vorth, as his cruiser approached the largest Martian city. "Where are the inhabitants? Where are their ships?" His question was answered when the city exploded, not with the chaotic destruction of a weapon strike, but with the precise timing of a carefully planned demolition. Every major structure erupted simultaneously, sending clouds of metal fragments and debris into carefully calculated trajectories. The hegemony cruiser found itself flying through a storm of high-velocity shrapnel that overwhelmed its shields and tore through its hull like paper dot. As Commander Vorth's ship broke apart, similar explosions erupted across Mars. Mining facilities, processing plants, and transportation hubs all detonated with perfect coordination, creating massive debris fields that turned the planet's orbital space into a nightmare of spinning metal and rock. What in the depths of space was that? General Krex demanded, as distress signals flooded his communications array. 3 scout ships had been destroyed in the first wave of explosions, and 2 more were reporting critical damage. The humans appear to have booby-trapped their own colonies, his tactical officer replied with obvious confusion. But the explosive patterns suggest they were mining the facilities for months. The level of preparation required would be enormous. Krex could respond. His flagship shuddered as something struck its rear shields. The impact wasn't strong enough to cause damage, but it shouldn't have been possible. His ship's sensors showed nothing in the surrounding space. Ghost 1, target eliminated, came Matt Rivera's voice over the human communication network. Switching to secondary target, Matt's ship had fired a single experimental torpedo directly into the Hegemony flagship's engine exhaust port. The weapon carried no explosive warhead, but instead deployed a cloud of microscopic nanobots programmed to eat through alien metal alloys. Within minutes, the massive dreadnought's primary engines would begin to fail as critical components dissolved. From the inside, similar attacks were happening throughout the Hegemony formation. Invisible human ships struck without warning, targeting specific systems with weapons designed to cause maximum chaos rather than immediate destruction. Shield generators failed mysteriously. Navigation systems reported false readings. Communication arrays began broadcasting random signals that jammed the aliens' own frequencies. "This is impossible," Krex snarled as his fleet began to spread out in confusion. "Our sensors show no enemy vessels. How are they attacking us?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Emma Peterson had spent the last 3 months studying captured Hegemony technology in a secret laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps. Her team had discovered that alien sensors operated on completely different principles than human detection systems, using energy signatures that were invisible to Earth's instruments, but also blind to human stealth technology. "It's like they've been hunting with their eyes closed," she had explained to General Torres during one of their briefings. "Their sensors are incredibly sophisticated, but only within a narrow range of frequencies. Step outside that range, and you might as well be invisible." Now, that theoretical advantage was becoming a practical nightmare for the invading fleet. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking with surgical precision before vanishing back into the darkness. Each attack was carefully planned to cause the maximum psychological impact. While preserving human resources for future operations, Captain Derek Thompson commanded a strike team aboard the captured Hegemony supply ship they had rechristened Trojan Horse. His crew of 25 volunteers had spent weeks learning to operate alien technology, memorizing the layout of enemy vessels and preparing for the most audacious operation in human military history. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy this fleet," Derek reminded his team as they approached the Hegemony command carrier. "We're trying to make them afraid. Fear is more valuable than any weapon because it spreads through enemy ranks like a virus." The Trojan Horse docked with the command carrier using proper Hegemony identification codes. Derek's team moved through the alien ship with practiced efficiency, planting devices that would turn the vessel's own systems against its crew. Atmospheric processors were reprogrammed to release hallucinogenic compounds. Artificial gravity generators were set to create random fluctuations. Computer systems were infected with viruses that would spread to other ships through normal communication channels. By the time the Hegemony crew realized they had been infiltrated, Derek's team was already gone, leaving behind a ship full of confused and frightened aliens who couldn't trust their own equipment. Similar operations were taking place throughout the enemy fleet. Human infiltrators moved like shadows through alien vessels, turning advanced technology into weapons of psychological warfare. They didn't need to destroy the ships when they could simply make them unreliable and terrifying for their crews to operate. General Krex found himself commanding a fleet that was falling apart from the inside. Ships reported equipment failures that made no technical sense. Crews claimed to see human intruders who vanished before security teams could respond. Communication systems carried whispered messages in languages the aliens didn't recognize, speaking of death and vengeance in voices that seemed to come from nowhere. "Sir, the 4th Squadron is requesting permission to withdraw." His communications officer reported with barely concealed panic. They're reporting that their ships are haunted by human spirits. Krex wanted to dismiss such nonsense, but he was beginning to understand that he was facing an enemy unlike anything in Hegemony experience. The humans weren't fighting like prey animals desperately defending their territory. They were hunting like apex predators who had been patient enough to let their enemies come to them. As his flagship's engines finally failed completely, leaving the massive vessel drifting helplessly in space, Krex realized that the Hegemony had made a fundamental miscalculation about human nature. They had assumed that a species without natural weapons or armor would be helpless in real combat. Instead, they had discovered that the most dangerous predators were the ones who could turn anything into a weapon and were smart enough to use their enemies' strengths against them. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson about what it meant to underestimate Earth's children. 3 weeks after the first invasion, fleet limped away from Earth's solar system. The Hegemony returned with reinforcements. This time they brought nearly 1,000 ships and commanders who had studied every detail of the previous battle. General Krex had been replaced by Supreme Commander Vex, a veteran of dozens of planetary conquests, who specialized in crushing stubborn resistance movements. The humans caught us off guard with primitive tricks. Vex announced to his assembled fleet, "Commanders, but we have learned from our mistakes. Our ships now carry enhanced sensors that can detect their stealth technology. Our security protocols have been upgraded to prevent infiltration. Most importantly, we will not give them time to prepare elaborate traps." The new Hegemony strategy was simple and brutal. Instead of approaching cautiously, they would strike fast and hard at every human settlement simultaneously. Overwhelming force would crush any resistance before the humans could deploy their unconventional tactics. What Supreme Commander Vex did not realize was that he was no longer fighting the same enemy. The 3 weeks between invasions had not been spent rebuilding defenses or manufacturing more weapons. Instead, humanity had undergone a fundamental transformation that reached into every corner of human civilization. Dr. Emma Peterson stood in what had once been the University of Geneva's biology department, now converted into a weapons research facility that would have given nightmares to the scientists who once worked there. The walls were lined with specimen tanks containing alien tissue samples, each one being subjected to different experimental compounds that her team had developed. The Hegemony physiology has 3 critical vulnerabilities, she explained too. The video conference of resistance leaders scattered across Earth and its colonies. Their respiratory systems cannot filter certain airborne particles. Their nervous systems are extremely sensitive to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Their reproduction cycles can be completely disrupted by targeted pheromone compounds. Emma had spent her entire career studying life, but the invasion had taught her that knowledge of biology could be weaponized in ways that made traditional explosives seem primitive. Her team had developed compounds that could be delivered through air systems, water supplies, or even direct contact. They weren't designed to kill quickly, but to spread through enemy populations like plagues, causing panic and systemic breakdown. Meanwhile, Captain Derek Thompson was running training sessions. In what used to be downtown Chicago, the city had been evacuated weeks ago, its buildings now serving as a massive urban warfare training ground for civilians who had volunteered to become guerrilla fighters. "Forget everything you think you know about fair fighting," Derek told the group of teachers, mechanics, and office workers who made up his current class. "The enemy has better armor, better weapons, and better technology. But they don't understand humans, and that's their weakness." The volunteers were learning skills that no civilian population in galactic history had ever needed to master. Studied alien anatomy to know where to strike for maximum effect. They memorized enemy communication protocols so they could intercept and manipulate alien orders. They practiced moving through urban environments like predators stalking prey, using every shadow and hiding place to their advantage. What made the training remarkable was how quickly ordinary humans adapted to warfare that would have challenged professional soldiers from other species. A retired librarian named Helen showed exceptional talent for explosive devices. A former chef called Mike demonstrated an intuitive understanding of chemical weapons that impressed even the military instructors. A kindergarten teacher named Ruth proved to be naturally gifted at psychological warfare techniques. "It's like they were born for this," Derek reported to General Torres during one of their encrypted communications. "I've never seen civilians pick up combat skills so fast. It's almost scary how good they're getting at this." Torres nodded grimly from her command bunker, buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains. "That's because we weren't really civilians. To begin with, every human grows up competing, fighting, and learning to survive in environments that would kill most alien species. We just forgot how dangerous we could be when we started playing nice with the galactic community." The proof of Torres' words became apparent when the second hegemony invasion began. This time, the aliens bypassed the outer solar system entirely and struck directly at Earth itself. Hundreds of warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in Earth's orbit, expecting to find a defenseless planet ready for conquest. Instead, they found a world that had been transformed into the most elaborate trap in military history. The moment the alien ships appeared, Earth's cities began to evacuate with mechanical precision. But this wasn't the chaotic flight of terrified civilians. It was the organized movement of a population that had spent weeks preparing for exactly this moment. Every person knew exactly where to go, what to do, and how to disappear into hiding. Places that had been prepared throughout the planet's urban areas. Within hours, the hegemony found themselves occupying empty cities that felt more like abandoned movie sets than living communities. Their sensors detected no large human populations, no military installations, no obvious targets for conquest. It was as if the entire species had simply vanished. "Where are they?" Supreme Commander Vex demanded, as his forces reported one empty settlement after another. 11 billion humans cannot simply disappear. The answer came in small ways at first. Alien patrols found their equipment malfunctioning for no apparent reason. Communication arrays began receiving signals that translated into disturbing messages about death and revenge. Food supplies spoiled overnight despite being stored in sealed containers. Then the real attacks began. A hegemony supply convoy traveling between occupied cities simply vanished during the night. No distress signals, no signs of battle, no trace of the vehicles or their crews. Search teams found only empty roads and the lingering scent of something that made their alien senses recoil in instinctive fear. Individual soldiers began disappearing from their posts. Security cameras showed them standing guard one moment and empty corridors the next. When backup teams arrived, they found only small piles of equipment and personal effects. As if the missing aliens had simply dissolved into nothing. The psychological impact was devastating. Hegemony troops who had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves afraid to patrol alone, afraid to sleep, afraid to trust their own senses. They were fighting an enemy that seemed to strike from nowhere and vanish without trace, leaving behind only questions and growing terror. Supreme Commander Vex realized that he was facing something unprecedented in galactic military history. His forces controlled every major city on Earth, but they were losing the war anyway. The humans had turned their entire planet into a hunting ground where every shadow might hide a predator and every moment of safety was just an illusion. "They're not fighting like any species we've encountered," he reported to Hegemony High Command. "They're fighting like the planet itself has turned against us. Our soldiers are being hunted by ghosts who know every street, every building, every hiding place better than we ever could." The reply from High Command was predictable. Crush the resistance with overwhelming force. But Vex was beginning to understand that overwhelming force was useless against an enemy that refused to gather in one place long enough to be overwhelmed. The humans had become something more dangerous than any conventional military force. Had become what their planet had trained them to be from the beginning. Apex predators who were patient enough to let their prey think they were safe before striking from the darkness. The surrender message arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, exactly 6 months after the hegemony's second invasion began. Supreme Commander Vex appeared on every human communication channel, looking nothing like the confident leader who had brought 1,000 ships to conquer Earth. His scales had lost their vibrant coloring. His eyes darted nervously even while speaking. His voice carried the unmistakable tremor of a being who had been broken by fear. To the leadership of Earth, he began. His words carefully chosen to avoid any hint of the arrogance that had marked previous hegemony communications. The Hegemony Alliance formally requests an immediate ceasefire and the opening of negotiations for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Admiral Robert Chen watched the broadcast from the bridge of what had once been the hegemony. Flagship Inevitable Victory, and was now the human vessel's second chance. The massive ship had been captured 3 weeks earlier when its entire crew simply abandoned it during the night, leaving behind a fully functional dreadnought and a note written in broken English that read, "Please stop the nightmares. It's almost sad," commented Captain Sarah Kim as she monitored the alien surrender. Broadcast. 6 months ago they thought we were prey animals. Now they're begging us to stop hunting them. Chen nodded while reviewing the tactical displays that showed the current state of the conflict, the nearly 1,000 ships that had participated. In the second invasion, fewer than 200 remained operational. The rest had been captured, destroyed, or simply abandoned by crews who could no longer handle the psychological pressure of fighting an enemy they could neither see nor understand. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. The hegemony had arrived as conquerors expecting to face a conventional military force. Instead, they had encountered something that violated every assumption about how civilized species conducted warfare. The humans hadn't just fought back, they had turned the very concept of occupation into a nightmare that spread through alien ranks like a contagious disease. It had started with simple disappearances, but the campaign had evolved into something far more sophisticated. Human resistance cells had learned to use alien technology better than its creators, turning captured equipment into weapons of psychological warfare that no military academy in the galaxy had prepared their students to face. Dr. Emma Peterson's biological weapons had proven devastatingly effective, not because they killed quickly, but because they created symptoms that drove alien minds toward madness. Hegemony soldiers found themselves unable to trust their own senses as carefully designed compounds made them see threats that weren't there while missing dangers that were very real indeed. Captain Derek Thompson's urban warfare training had produced a generation of human fighters who moved through occupied cities like invisible death itself. Former accountants and shop owners had become predators who could track alien patrols for days, learning their routines and habits before striking with precision that left enemy commanders questioning the competence of their own forces. But perhaps, most importantly, humanity had demonstrated something that terrified every species in the galaxy more than any weapon or military tactic. They had shown that Earth's children possessed an almost supernatural ability to adapt to any situation and turn it to their advantage. No matter what countermeasures the hegemony developed, humans found ways around them within days or even hours. Problem isn't their technology. General Torres had explained to the global resistance leadership during one of their weekly briefings. The problem is that they think like prey animals trying to avoid predators, but we think like predators hunting prey. That gives us advantages they can't compensate for with better weapons or stronger armor. The truth of her words had become apparent as the occupation dragged on. Hegemony forces found themselves constantly reactive, always responding to human initiatives rather than taking control of the situation. They were playing a game whose rules they didn't understand, against opponents who had been training for it their entire lives. Ambassador Tom Williams stood once again in the Galactic Council chambers. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. The same alien representatives who had dismissed humanity as weak and irrelevant now watched him with expressions that mixed fear, respect, and barely concealed terror. Word of the hegemony's defeat had spread throughout the galaxy, faster than their ships could travel. The human delegation wishes to address the Council regarding recent events, announced Prime Arbiter Vol, his energy form flickering with what Tom had learned to recognize as nervousness. Honored members, Tom began, his voice calm and measured. Earth wishes to inform the Council that the conflict with the Hegemony Alliance has been resolved through their unconditional surrender. Humanity is prepared to return to peaceful relations with all galactic civilizations, provided that our sovereignty and territorial integrity are respected. The silence that followed was deafening. The insectoid queen, who had once clicked her, mandibles in amusement, now sat perfectly still, her compound eyes fixed on Tom with the intensity of a being who finally understood what she was looking at. The reptilian representative from the scaled dominion had his claws partially extended, an unconscious defensive gesture that spoke volumes about how the galaxy's perception of humanity had changed. Chancellor Thok of the Stone Brotherhood was the first to find his voice. The Council recognizes Earth's victory over the Hegemony Alliance and formally acknowledges human territorial claims throughout the Sol system. His rocky features showed none of the contempt that had marked their previous interactions. Brotherhood also wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations and trade agreements with Earth at the earliest possible opportunity. Similar statements followed from every major galactic power. Species that had viewed humans as potential servants or administrative assistants now competed to offer alliance treaties and military cooperation agreements. The transformation was so complete that Tom almost felt sorry for them.
Galaxy
"Wishes to understand," the Queen finally said, her translated voice carrying overtones of desperate curiosity. How a species that appeared so peaceful and cooperative proved capable of such devastating military effectiveness. Tom considered his answer carefully. "Your Majesty, humanity has never been peaceful. We've simply been polite. There's a significant difference between the two. But we understand how the distinction might be confusing for species that haven't spent millions of years learning to be apex predators while maintaining complex social structures." He paused, to let this sink in before continuing. "Earth trained us to survive in an environment that would kill most galactic species within days. We learned to cooperate because cooperation made us more effective hunters. We developed technology because tools made us more dangerous than any natural weapons. We became civilized because civilization allowed us to organize our destructive capabilities more efficiently." The council chamber remained silent as Tom delivered his final message. The hegemony made the mistake of assuming that, because we chose diplomacy over violence, we were incapable of violence when necessary. They confused our civility with weakness, and our cooperation with submission. We hope that other galactic civilizations will learn from their example. As Tom left the chamber, he reflected on how completely the galaxy's understanding of humanity had changed. 6 months ago, they had been dismissed as prey animals who might serve useful administrative functions. Now, they were recognized as apex predators who were sophisticated enough to choose when to reveal their true nature. The galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating Earth's children again. Because now, everyone understood the lesson that the hegemony had learned too. Late, when you evolve on a planet that trains killers, politeness is just another weapon in your arsenal.